You remember a pair of eyes, not the color, not the shape, just the stare, the kind that undressed your will before it ever touched your skin. It wasn't love, it was something older, sharper, almost holy, like being hunted by a god who had forgotten mercy. You didn't want to run. You wanted to be seen, pierced, devoured, and when you breathed in his cruelty, it tasted like freedom. No one told you that desire comes with teeth, that it doesn't bloom where safety grows, but where danger whispers. He never promised softness, only the possibility of collapse. You called it passion, but the truth was uglier. It was a ritual, a sacrifice of your sanity on the altar of a man who never had to raise his voice to shatter you. And you still wonder why the kind ones never stirred your blood, why silence wrapped around their love like a coffin, why you craved the one who could end you. You were never taught to want the flame, but you always reached for the match. You never feared the edge, only the dullness of flat ground. What they called love, you called suffocation. Their warmth, their offerings, their careful sentences, all wrapped you in gauze, and in that sterile comfort, something inside you began to rot. You did not desire to be held. You desired to be shattered precisely because only the man who could destroy you might finally make you real. That truth has festered behind your politeness for years. You smiled at kindness, but your soul starved. You said thank you while your bones howled for danger. It begins with the eyes. His eyes. They did not soften when they looked at you. They studied you, as if you were a riddle wrapped in flesh, something to be unpeeled. Not protected. He did not ask for your story. He did not perform empathy, and yet your breath caught in his presence, because for the first time you were not coddled, you were seen, and it burned. This is the paradox you cannot admit aloud, the man who treats you like glass bores you, but the one who threatens your structure, who speaks in riddles, who does not reassure you he awakens something ancestral. You are not a victim of this desire. You are its architect. You feed it in silence. Sharpen it with every soft boy you reject, every loyal man you ghost. What you crave is not stability, but proximity to collapse, because collapse, when it comes from him, feels like permission to be undone, not ruined, released. You dress the hunger in metaphors, in poetry, in wounded sighs with friends, but the truth is brutal. You do not want the man who understands you. You want the man who dismembers your illusions with a glance, the one who does not explain himself, the one who lives above your need for closure. He is the mirror that bleeds. You look into him and find yourself cut open not by cruelty, but by the absence of apology. He does not kneel, he does not soothe, and this lack of submission, this unyielding posture, makes your spine straighten. Around him, you do not feel safe, you feel alive, and that is the filthiest secret of all safety, was never your God. You lied when you said you wanted kindness. What you wanted was intensity dressed as danger, truth masked as threat. You wanted to be taken, not gently, but as a storm takes a coastline unapologetically, irreversibly. You remember the first time he ignored you, not out of malice, but indifference, and instead of retreating, your mind clawed at the silence. You rewrote the script of his absence into a prophecy. You built a cathedral of meaning around a single glance. He did not text back, and you built myths in his silence, because his silence meant it was a refusal to be ordinary. And that refusal is what you worshipped. You could not control him, and that powerlessness, that trembling, was mistaken for love. But it wasn't love. It was submission to a force stronger than your ego. He did not flatter you. He did not chase. And because of that, you came undone. The man who could destroy you He does not need to. And that restraint, that nonchalance, rips you open because you know he could at any moment and chooses not to. That choice terrifies you. It drags your instincts into the open. You check your makeup twice before seeing him, but it's not vanity, it's ritual, it's offering. You dress like you're entering battle, and you are. You want to matter to him not because he needs you, but because he doesn't. You want to haunt him, even though he is unhauntable. You dream of being the exception to his aloofness, the storm that forces his gaze to linger. But every time he slips away, you spiral deeper. You hate it. You need it. You do not tell your friends the truth. You say he's toxic. You call it a phase, but your body knows. Your body aches for the abyss he carries inside his voice. It's not abuse. It's archetype. He is not a man. He is the doorway to your shadow. You could have chosen ease. You could have chosen the man who texts back, who plans dinners, who remembers birthdays. But no, you chose the one whose presence rearranges your nervous system, who teaches you that wanting is not weakness, but worship. He does not play games. That is what confuses you. He does not manipulate. He simply is. And in that purity of being in that indifference to being wanted, he becomes the most wanted thing in your life. Because he is not performing desire, he is radiating detachment, and detachment is the cruelest aphrodisiac of all. Every time he turns away, he becomes myth. Every time he speaks without pleasing you, he becomes legend. He is not chasing you. He is challenging you not out loud, but by existing without your validation. And that challenge is erotic. There was a moment, perhaps, when you imagined soft mornings with him, but even those fantasies turned brutal. You did not see coffee and kisses. You saw his back turned, shirtless, leaving the bed before you woke. And that image did not disappoint you. It destroyed you, and you loved the destruction. What you call heartbreak is often just ego death, and you needed it. You needed a man who would not kneel before your tears. You needed to see yourself begging and ask, who is this creature who trained her to crave chains? He never promised you anything, and that, too, was a promise. A promise that you would not be lied to. A promise that you would never be reduced to a role. In his coldness, there was truth. And that truth was sexier than affection. You are not in love with him. You are in love with the part of you that wakes when he walks in. You are in love with the mirror he holds, the one that bleeds. He is not dangerous because he harms you. He is dangerous because he reveals how deeply you long to be dominated, not physically, but psychologically. You want to be defeated by something real, something ruthless, something that cannot be tamed by romance or logic. That is why you stayed. That is why you kept returning, not to him, but to yourself, the self that only exists in his shadow. Because in the end, you do not want a man. You want a crucifixion, and he, unknowingly, offers the nails. You want him to look at you and flinch, not because you are beautiful, but because you are becoming a threat. Because you have stared into his silence and built a kingdom there. Because you are learning to bleed without asking for a bandage. That is the secret you'll never confess. That is the altar you crawl to in your sleep. And it never ends with love. It ends with a mirror that bleeds, a mirror that says you asked for this. You always did. You told yourself you were clever. You told yourself you could play the game, smile, flirt, withdraw, make him need you, ache for you, chase what he could not have. You told yourself the distance would seduce him, but you forgot who he was. He did not need your attention. He needed only to exist, and his existence, in its calm defiance, began to slice you open. He did not respond to your warmth. He responded to your silence, your uncertainty, your unspoken prayers for control. And when he danced just beyond reach, not out of strategy, but instinct, you began to unravel. This is not a story of cruelty. It is a story of hunger, not his yours. A hunger so sharp it disguised itself as pride. You didn't want to be chosen. You wanted to matter, not in the way flowers matter to a vase, but in the way knives matter to a throat. You wanted to be the one thing that could make him feel, but he does not feel the way others do. He does not beg, he does not plead, and so you became the one who did. Every time he left, you vowed it would be the last, and every time, his absence made your blood sing. There was no affection in him, only presence. No sweet promises, only silence that throbbed louder than any poem. You replayed every glance, every unfinished sentence. You imagined meanings, omens, riddles. You made his indifference holy, and in that temple, you offered your dignity. He never danced to your rhythm. He danced to his own slow, precise, jagged, and somehow you matched it. You adjusted, you twisted, you sharpened yourself. Not for him, but because of him. You told yourself you weren't changing, but every text left unanswered, every conversation that collapsed under his aloof gaze, rewired your hunger. You began to crave what you could never command. He does not ask for your secrets. He unmakes them, with no touch, no demand, only presence. You lie to yourself with men who cling. You say you want to be adored, but the one who could unmake you with a glance, that's the one you want to drown in, because drowning means you finally found a sea deeper than yourself. You are not helpless. You are complicit. Every glance you threw was a test, every silence a trap. You wanted to know, will he fall like the others? Will he praise me, need me? But he never did. And so he became the only thing that mattered. He is not a person to you. He is a measurement, a mirror that reflects the exact shape of your emptiness. You told yourself you'd walk away, but you never asked, who will I be without the ache? What fills me when he is no longer there to reject me? You say he is cruel, but he never lied. You say he played games, but he never promised rules. You say he hurt you, but he never touched you. The pain you feel, you crafted it, not because you're weak, but because you're starving. Starving for something that doesn't beg to be fed. You do not want the man who needs you. You want the one who could destroy you, yet doesn't care enough to try. That indifference is erotic. That distance is sacred. That danger, the possibility of your total psychological erasure, becomes the only thing worth chasing. You dream of being the exception, the one who cracks his mask, pierces the fortress. You imagine him calling at midnight, whispering that he was wrong. But deep down, you know the moment he bends, the spell breaks. The moment he loves you safely, he becomes the rest. And so, you live in tension, between wanting to be consumed and wanting to be untouched, between worshipping his absence and cursing your own presence. You become a contradiction in heels, in lipstick, in broken prayers. He doesn't love you. That's why you love him. He doesn't need you. That's why you need him. He does not surrender. That's why you kneel. You never saw him as a man. You saw him as a blade, and you danced around him, asking to be cut, pretending it was a mistake. But you choreographed every wound. You placed your neck exactly where his silence would fall, and when it did, you called it betrayal. But it was a performance, a beautiful, brutal ballet. You trained yourself to seduce, to lure, to manipulate with softness. But he does not respond to softness. He responds to sovereignty. And in the absence of dominance, You feel yourself disintegrate because he does not want to possess you. He wants nothing, and that is unbearable. You don't fear abandonment, you fear irrelevance, and he offers that fear without blinking. You imagine him alone, untouched, unbothered, and that image does more to you than 1,000 compliments. You would rather be broken by him than built by another, because he does not build, he burns. You wanted him to suffer when you walked away, but he didn't. He evaporated, like smoke, no weight, no residue, just a memory you can't hold. And that is his cruelty, not action, but the absence of reaction. You call your friends, you scream his name in the quiet of your mind, but all you hear is yourself, because he never enters where he is not sovereign. You are not chasing him. You are chasing the part of yourself that only wakes in his presence. The hunter in you needed prey, but he was not prey. He was the cliff, the fall, the sound of your own scream echoing off stone. He did not destroy you, he exposed you. And in that exposure, you found the raw shape of your own hunger. Do not mistake this for romance. This is not about love. This is about domination, not of bodies, but of meaning. You wanted to be the one thing he could not ignore, but he ignored everything. And in that void, you collapsed. You imagined revenge, silence, power, but none of it touched him. He is beyond reach, not because he runs, but because he never moves. He simply stands unmoved, unshaken, and you orbit him like a dying planet. He is not a villain. He is an absence that reveals your dependency on being seen. You did not fall for him. You fell for what he denied you, and that denial became your religion. There is a moment when you stop pretending, when the laughter fades, and all that's left is the raw whisper, I would have let him ruin me. Not because he asked, but because you needed to be ruined. Because ruin means rebirth. Because ruin means surrender. You never wanted equality. You wanted surrender without shame. You wanted to bow before something that would not kneel to you. He never touched your body. He touched your illusion, and you mistook that for cruelty. But it was honesty. He never wore a mask. You did. And now, every man who touches you feels like paper. Every conversation, a script, every affection, a lie you can no longer sell yourself. Because once you've tasted the edge of a god who walks as a man, everything else tastes like sugar water. You say he broke you, but you were already broken. He simply pointed to the cracks and refused to pretend they were beautiful. You want him back, not for love, but for the silence that once made your knees weak. The silence that said, I see your hunger. I will not feed it. You called it toxic, but it was sacred. You called it cold, but it was pure. You called it a phase, but it was your unveiling. And now, you walk differently. You smile less. You know more. Because you have danced with the knife. And though it did not kill you, it showed you who you truly are when the mask slips. Not a lover, not a victim, but a worshipper of the man who could destroy you and didn't. He never came back. And yet, you never left. Your body walked, your mouth spoke, your days filled with noise, but part of you remained seated before him, invisible, obedient. Time passed, but the wound did not, because it was not a wound. It was a throne, built of every silence he gave you, every refusal, every moment he let you collapse without offering a hand. And now you sit upon it, alone, but crowned, not with his approval, but with what survived after he turned away. It is a strange royalty, the kind that tastes of ash and pride in equal measure. You did not win, you did not heal, but you endured. And in the ruins of your expectation, something sharper emerged. You no longer wait to be chosen. You no longer chase his shadow. You have become what you feared, unyielding, unbothered, untouched. But it cost you something, didn't it? The girl who once longed for soft hands, for whispered affirmations, she is gone, burned in the fire of his indifference, her ashes scattered across the nights you stayed awake, pretending you didn't care. You learned the hardest truth what survives. Obsession is not affection, but architecture, a new structure built in the image of absence. You became your own hunter. You denied yourself the same sweetness he denied you. You mastered restraint, learned to walk past mirrors without checking your worth, taught your pulse to silence itself when another pair of eyes tried to play the game. You no longer flinch at distance. You rule it. They do not recognize you now. Your softness, once bait, has calcified into elegance. Your eyes no longer beg. They measure, and the men who once tried to win you now stand confused, unable to find a weakness to press into because you don't offer one. You learned from the one who never bowed, and now neither do you. It would be easier to say you hated him, easier to call him a narcissist, a coward, a ghost. But he was never any of those things. He was simply free, free from needing your love, free from performing desire, free from being wounded by your disappointment. He did not mirror you, and so you were forced to become a mirror to yourself. That is what cracked you, not his cruelty, his freedom. And now you wear that freedom like armor, not because you are healed, but because you are no longer dependent on being understood. That dependency was the leash. He cut it, not with kindness, but with absence, and you hated him for it. Then you copied him, not out of revenge, but out of awe. You saw what it meant to be unmoved, to let the world scream and offer no reply, to let others project their worth onto you, and never adjust your posture. He taught you, without teaching, how power does not chase. And now, you've stopped running. You still remember the last moment, the final look, or the final silence. You're not sure which came first, but you remember the sensation, not heartbreak, but disintegration. Your image of yourself melted, your games failed, your need made no impact. He walked away, and the world did not end. It just got quieter, and in that silence, a different version of you began to rise. One who no longer begs to be seen, one who does not flinch at being misread, one who understands desire is not love, power is not cruelty, and longing is not virtue. You stopped worshipping the man. You started worshipping what he awoke, because that is his true legacy, not the ache, but the awakening, not the absence, but what you became in it. He forced you to confront the possibility that love, as you knew it, was nothing more than a performance. That needing someone to want you is not intimacy, but addiction. And once that illusion died, there was no going back. Now, when you are touched, you feel nothing unless there is risk. When you are admired, you smile, but do not kneel. You understand the price of sovereignty, and you pay it in full every day. You choose silence over explanation. Every time you walk away without making someone understand why. You do not cry for him anymore. You cry for the version of you that had to die to learn this. The version that still believed softness guaranteed safety. That desire meant devotion. That you could be adored without losing yourself. She is dead now. You buried her beneath the throne of ashes, and the woman who sits there now, she smiles less. But when she does, it burns. They ask, what changed? You say nothing. Because how do you explain that the greatest transformation was done in silence? That the man you claim to forget is the one who made forgetting impossible, not because of his love, but because of what his absence summoned in you. You no longer write poems, you write boundaries. You no longer dream of being chosen, you dream of choosing. You no longer fear being alone, You fear being owned because you've tasted freedom. And though it was bitter, it taught you this better to be misunderstood and sovereign than adored and domesticated. There are nights you still remember, not out of longing, but recognition. You see his face not in dreams, but in your own reflection. The stillness, the refusal, the eyes that no longer beg. Because you inherited him, not his love, but his way of seeing. You became what you once worshipped, and now you understand why he never knelt. It was not pride, it was clarity. He saw the cage you were building, and he refused to enter. And now, so do you. You walk through the world untouched, not because you are invulnerable, but because you finally know the difference between affection and possession, between praise and power, between being wanted and being free. They say you're cold now. You smile. They say you're guarded. You nod. Let them write their own stories about your silence. You owe them nothing, because the one who made you bleed also made you sovereign, and you do not betray that initiation with softness. You do not wait by the phone. You do not check who watched your stories. You have become the story, not the protagonist, but the storm, not the victim, but the altar. He walked away, and you rose, not healed, but sovereign. He did not love you. He refused to love you in the way you begged, and that refusal became the most sacred gift you ever received. Because he was not your lover, he was your test, and now you sit upon a throne built of all the versions of you that tried to be enough. They are ash now. They do not scream. They do not reach. They do not beg. They burn, and in their silence, you hear the only truth that ever mattered. You never wanted love. You wanted to survive it. Somewhere, in a room that does not exist, a mirror stands cracked, not broken, just split, slightly, down the center. On one side, the girl who once waited. On the other, the woman who does not return calls. The dust never settles here. The air smells of something half-remembered. Smoke, maybe, or the scent of someone who never needed to be touched to leave a scar. You lean closer. The reflection does not move. She watches you with your own eyes, but you're not sure which side of the glass you're on. And just before the light flickers out, you smile, not because you're free, but because you finally know who held the knife.